Hello and welcome to another divorce discussions episode. And today we're going to talk about something maybe a little bit different than divorce, but maybe for some of you who are thinking of turning that side hustle into a full-time job, or maybe people who want to up level their branding, their marketing, their strategy in their own business. I have an expert on this podcast for you. I'd like to introduce Patty Farmer. She is a marketing and media strategist. Can I say that? Who
You
really,
absolutely can.
really focuses on helping women who are trying to get out there, get visible, and grow their business. So, Patty, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I love the theme of your show.
Well, thank you. And I want to tell you that I think that what you're doing is really interesting and really important because I do think women approach marketing and media and business and all of that kind of good jazz a little bit differently maybe than their male counterparts would. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would say it's absolutely accurate. And I would even take it a little bit further and say that women who have been divorced, and I'm sure men too, but since my company primarily deals with women, I find that a lot of times when women have been through divorce, they're trying to kind of reinvent themselves, right? And so trying to market themselves, like they don't really know how to do it. And I know for myself, when I went through my divorce, I just celebrated 25 years of being married to my
Yay.
husband, which is really exciting, but I was a single mom for a while. And I know that when I got married again, my husband asked me a really unique question. He said to me, "Well, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Well, you're not the main breadwinner anymore. Like you're not having to do it by yourself." I was a single mom.
Right.
So now, if you could do whatever you want, what would you want to do? Well, as a single mom, it was really all about like how I was taking care of my kids, putting food on the table and, excelling at my job and bringing in money. And when he told me that or asked me that, I thought, oh, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And he said, oh, well, why don't you do that? So it was um, kind of an interesting thing for me to really be able to decide, oh, well, what would I want to do?
Right.
Right. And because I had worked in the mortgage industry, that's the industry that I came from, there was marketing involved in there. You had to go out and market yourself to do that. And I just realized that that was the part that I loved the most. And so I just decided that in that year, it was right about that time we moved from Las Vegas, where I was raised and where we got married, to Dallas, Texas, where I live now because of my husband's job. And we moved in 2008. And the mortgage industry, that's where the bubble happened and everything crashed in 2008. So then I had to kind of reinvent myself again. And I thought, well, you know what? I really love marketing and I really loved helping other people to market. So when I worked with realtors or whatever, I really loved that part. And so I decided that's what I was going to do. I didn't know that it was going to change the trajectory of my business, but I have to tell you, it's a defining moment when
Yeah.
somebody goes through a divorce. It's almost like you have this clean slate, right? You have this clean slate to be able to redefine yourself again.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of scary too, depending upon whatever the reasons were that you got divorced in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Interestingly enough, I'm in Texas too. I'm just up the road from you, just up 30 from you in the Texarkana area. So, small world.
Absolutely.
But, I think that the thing is, a lot of women feel that becoming an entrepreneur is what they want to do. But I think a lot of their family and their friends and other people, they look at that. What is that small business statistic? 75% of small, new businesses fail in the first 2 years or something crazy. I don't remember what it is. They quote that over and over and over again. And there's so much potential when you're an entrepreneur. And
I think there's so much potential. I actually really feel like for everything that's happened in the world, it's the entrepreneur, right? Really, it's the entrepreneur who we're creative and we're risk takers and we're action takers, right? And so I feel like it's exciting to be an entrepreneur. Now,
right.
the thing with that is it also can be a roller coaster, right? You don't have a regular paycheck like a job, right? And I think for women, it is even harder. If a man doesn't make it to Johnny's soccer game It's like, oh, well, daddy's at work, right? If mom doesn't, though, it's like, oh, she feels guilty, thinks, oh, maybe I should go get a job, right? So I think it's different for men and women, not better or worse or right or wrong, just different,
Yeah,
right? And so I feel like for a woman, if she wants to become an entrepreneur, there's just some things she needs to do. But like everything else, you don't have to do it by yourself, right? If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a tribe to build a business. You just need to build your tribe and then just start building relationships with the right people. Because
yeah,
let's get real, you could have a job and lose your job too. It's not like people don't lose their job every single day, right? So
exactly.
that's not a guarantee.
Right, right. So when you're starting with let's say you're starting with somebody who has um, a very good idea, they have worked in the past, they've got a good solid head on their shoulders, and they're willing to work. What are the first steps that you recommend for that marketing aspect of any new business?
So for me, what I like to do when people come to me is I have an assessment I have them take first. And the reason why is because if they take this assessment, it doesn't cost anything, but it actually lets them know, oh, some of those skill sets you have that maybe you think in a job aren't really as applicable, but they really are as an entrepreneur, right? And it also helps you to know, wow, what are the skill sets you have that are really good? What are some that maybe you need to tweak a little bit, right? So that oh, well, maybe I need to work on this, or maybe I need to work on this. But what it really does, it allows you to take the skill sets that you have that you score high on and know, oh, wow, that's what I need to do to bring in a quick injection of cash. And sometimes that's what they need in the beginning because just like when you go in business for yourself, there are some things that you're going to have to buy, right? You have a printer, a laptop, there's some things that you might need to have depending upon what type of business that you go into, right? But it isn't any different than if you buy a franchise or any other type of business. There's always costs involved. But I think getting a quick injection of cash is always one of the first things. And it also takes the fear away.
Yeah. Yeah. If once you sell that first thing or once you get that first client or whatever, then I know there's a lot of is made of that imposter syndrome. And I think everybody's a little nervous the first little while, but once you get a couple of clients under your belt and you're like, oh yeah, I can do this. I know how to do this. You really do get that confidence. So I totally agree with that, with what you're saying. I mean, you're the expert, but to me, it really rings true for everything. What do you think is the biggest mistake that people make as entrepreneurs with their marketing or with their business planning?
Oh, I love this one. I think that the biggest mistake that people make is that they confuse networking and marketing and sales and marketing. They're not the same thing. So a lot of times people are out networking, right? And they think that they're marketing their business or they're in sales. That is not, that is just relationship building. You're building relationships there. You don't know where they're going to go. It's like a first date, right? You don't know where it's going to go. And a lot of times they spend too much time trying to sell in that very beginning, and that isn't really where they need to. So sales is service for me. That's what I believe. And before you can really, you have to serve first. And so I always believe that if you lead with contribution, compensation will follow, but it always starts with contribution. And that's where people need to start. So everything I do, whether I'm joining an organization, a networking group, whatever the case may be, the first question I ask myself is, what can I contribute? Because when you contribute first, you show up, people notice you, right? And it will lead to compensation, but always work on contribution first. And so I think that when people are looking, if you think about the things that you're good at or that you like, that you're interested in, those give you some head starts on how you can contribute. And that really starts there. And I think that is really a good way to be able to do it.
Yeah, and that, I almost stopped. Well, I won't name any names, but I have stopped going to several networking events because it was like snakes all crawling over each other, trying to talk to each other to get, buy my product, be my affiliate, be this, but be what. And I really like the networking groups where kind of the first thing is, tell me about yourself. How can I serve you? Like that real, or how can I support you? Whatever term people use. I really think that that's a whole different ballgame. Yeah. So
No, I
so
think it is too.
that's the networking. And then what is the marketing part then? If that's not marketing, what is marketing?
Well, I think marketing is really when you are building relationship as part of the process, right? Because the reality really is that the only difference between a contact and a contract is the R, and the R stands for relationships, right? When you first meet somebody, and right now with AI is just your assistant. People want the human connection,
Yeah,
right? So I think that is what is really important. And when you're building the know, like, trust, people need to know that you're going to do what you say. So one of the first things that people really need to do is start having a conversation with somebody, and whatever it is that you say you're going to do, like say, like it's easy to make introductions. If you listen, actively listen to what people say, and you ask people, how can I serve you? It's really easy to be able to do an introduction. But here's something I will tell you that I would say people should stop doing is they should stop asking people what they do. I think that is a big mistake, because I think when people say to someone, oh, so what is it that you do? Well, people start telling them and then they go right into sales, right? It's just a natural progression. If you
sure.
change the question from what do you do to who do you serve, it's no longer about them.
Right.
Now it's about the people they serve. And then when people answer that question, or can't, which tells you something right there, right? But when they start telling you who they serve, then you can start asking yourself, wow, I serve them too.
Yeah,
And that
right,
changes the whole conversation, right?
right, right,
And so I always like to really think about, before we can really worry about marketing, I need to know who you are as a person.
right.
You know what I mean? And I got to tell you, somebody asked me something once on a podcast. I couldn't believe it. They were a new podcast, because if they would have been around a while, they would have known this was not the question to ask live to somebody. But I've done a lot of it, a lot of video and a lot of interviews. So what they said to me was, so Patty, could you tell us what you do, but don't use any of your titles in 15 words or less? You can't say marketing, media, strategist, speaker, coach. I couldn't say any of those words. And she didn't tell me she was going to ask me that. She just literally threw that on me. Right now, somebody else or somebody newer than that might have been like, wow, I don't know what to say. I actually really honestly just opened my mouth without even thinking and said, well, my titles will tell you what I do, but who I am at my core is an idea generator, a people connector, a relationship builder, and a revenue multiplier. And that was exactly 15 words without me even thinking about it. I couldn't believe it. Now I actually use it in my bio. But I have to tell you, when you think about it, which makes you want to connect with me more and get to know me? That I connect people and I know how to generate ideas, and then I'm a relationship builder. Or when somebody says, oh, she's a 7-figure event producer, she publishes a magazine, she does this, right? It actually, when you think about it, stop telling people your titles and start telling people who you are. I
Right.
think that's more important.
Yeah. And that's a really good yeah, first of all, congratulations for answering that, because I think I would have got the deer in the headlight look and gone, that probably would have been. But uh again, it is when you know what you're doing and you know who you're serving, those kind of questions don't throw you as much as if you're not really sure what you're doing. It's being, and I'm going to go a little woo woo here, but it's when you're like aligned with your values, and when when you believe in what you're doing, you can answer questions about it. And I think you just showed that.
I think also one of the things that people are thinking about, what is it that I want to do, or what's the next thing I want to do, or what is something I might want to add to my products or services? I think some of the things that people should ask themselves is, what brings you joy and what feeds your soul? This is why you got in business for yourself, right? What brings you joy and what feeds your soul? And so for me, when I asked those things, it was like, oh, for a long time, like 10 years, my company was a marketing company, but we didn't really specialize in women then. It took me a little while for me to realize that when I looked in my calendar every day, that every time I got to talk to a woman who had a new idea and stuff, that it just really brought me so much joy. Not to say that I don't work with men. Usually the men that I work with, they usually serve women. They're, whatever it is, their business, they serve women. But it's just so easy for me, and I get them. That's what makes me different. I think that because I have 6 daughters and come from a family of 5 girls, like I totally get it. Like all of everything that a woman is, I'm so used to and I love it and stuff. And so it took me a while. I didn't want to come out. I was fearful of saying, well, somebody said to me one time, they said, so Patty, really, you're going to choose who to work with from somebody's genitalia? And I was like, it kind of put me back and thought, wow, maybe I shouldn't say that. And
Right.
so I would say it, but I didn't put it on my website.
Right.
I just said it. I would say, oh, I market to women and the right men show up. That's what I used to say. And then all of a sudden I just realized that, you know what? I love working with women.
Yeah.
And I love working with women who are action takers and decision makers and rule breakers, and they want to do it their own way. That like brings me joy and excites me, and I love it. And it's my own business, and that's what I choose to do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of marketing people, and I feel like when you specialize or niche, like some people say, it makes you stand out even more, right?
Right.
So I was so thankful that I finally got my brave on, and chose to serve who I want to serve, right? And
Right.
so many people say, "Oh my gosh, Patty," but they also tell me that when they refer me business, they're like, "Oh, you know what? You should talk to Patty Farmer. She markets specifically for women."
Yeah. And I think that is a thing. I know when I started my divorce coaching, it was interesting because I was an executive coach and almost all my clients were men. And so when I went to become a divorce coach, a lot of them would say, well, hey, I'm going through a divorce. Would you like to coach me? I'd be like, no, hell no. I'm working with women because again, I think I can identify with what they're going through a little bit more. Now, I do work with some men, and I do work with some people who identify as women who may not have been born women, but that were born female, but that's fine with me. I mean, I don't care what you identify with. It's whether or not you and I click. And I just know that I tend to click as a coach better with other women or people who identify as women. So yeah, I think
Which
that's
means we
normal.
serve them better, right?
Yeah.
And I think that as a coach, consultant, strategist, whatever it is, I feel like if sales is service and I'm being of service, if I'm not the right person, that I can refer them to somebody else who is, right?
Right.
I actually know marketing people who literally specialize in just working with men,
Sure. And I know
right?
divorce
So,
coaches, same. Yeah. Yeah.
right, so I feel like that's just an easy one. So it's getting clear. Like sometimes I think people want to be clever, right? In the marketing space, they really do. They want to be
Yeah.
clever. I'm like, no, clarity over clever every single time. Make it clear so that people know. Back when I was in the mortgage industry, I'll never forget one day this girl said, I'm going to call myself a mortgage architect. And I was like, well, that sounds nice on a business card. But when
Right.
somebody wants to buy a house, they're really looking for a loan officer, right? They're not going to go to Google and say, oh, who's a mortgage architect, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's great to be clever. You could do that in your copy sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, people just need to be clear on what it is that you're going to do for them. Like, what are the results they're going to get? So you need to be clear. And so I think that really thinking about what that is really makes a lot of sense. And that's where marketing is so important. So like I feel like the little dash in between marketing and media is like messaging.
Yeah.
Right? You have marketing and media and then there's messaging in there. So you have
Yeah.
to really get your messaging down so that people really understand because it's really easy for them. And if you get it right, people will just raise their hand. They'll self-select and say, oh, tell me more. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm buying it right now, but they may say, oh, tell me more about that. How do you do that? Like, tell me about that. And
Yeah.
that's how you start building that relationship. And then they're going to be like, oh, because when you think about the customer journey, sometimes they're just becoming aware of that problem. But sometimes they're further along and they're aware of it. Now they're interested in doing something about it. Then the next step is like, okay, now I realize that I have that problem. I want to do something about it. I'm actively looking for someone, but are you the someone? Do we have the right vibe? Right? So you have to know that you need to speak, whether it's social media, blogging, what on a podcast, whatever it is, you need to know who are you talking to? Who is the demographic? Are they just aware? Are they interested? Are they ready to take the next steps so that you can speak to them where they are? And I think a lot of times what happens, especially on social media, people think they should be everywhere because somebody told them that, which is not true. Really, it's like, where are your ideal
Yeah.
clients? That's where you should be. And you
Yeah.
should be speaking to them where they are
Yeah.
and don't worry about everything else. How I have a magazine is literally because I didn't want to blog. So there's things that you don't want to do, don't do them.
Yeah. Yeah. Patty, the time has just zipped by. I cannot believe how fast these go. We've covered a ton of stuff. So, and I think really helpful stuff for somebody who might be thinking about getting into more marketing, more media, more messaging, all this kind of good stuff. What do you think is the most important of what we talked about? What's the single most important thing for people to think about?
I think that the single most important thing for them to think about is how do they want to serve? Like, I think people focus more on everything else, but how do they want to serve? I think really we need to ask ourselves that. I think it's a very, very important question, and it's really kind of should be the starting point.
Okay. And I agree with you. So thank you for that. Even if I didn't agree with you, that was a great answer. Thank you. I totally agree with you. And last question, always, Patty, how can people find out more about what you do, and if they want to maybe read some of your stuff or work with you? How do they reach you?
Thank you so much. They can just go to my website, which is pattyfarmer.com. Patty's with a Y, pattyfarmer.com. My podcast is there. The magazine is there. Everything I do is in one place for them to find everything. I have a lot of free gifts that are there too. That quiz that I talked about is there. So they go there, they can pretty much find everything.
Great. So go there. Terrific resources, and definitely take a listen. I'm going to go listen to some of your podcasts as well, because I think we can all learn to be better at our business and marketing and media and messaging. So, Patty, thank you so much. Really appreciate you for being